أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب عليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها هبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من لمثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم أزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنا يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخنا على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحدق العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفئ بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجحلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فادهم من البلاء أقلت وكم من عثار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حالي وقسرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفدحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور أطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك قضاؤه فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعد أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي. أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضئا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت، أو تباعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى الملاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا، وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا. ما هكذا ظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثور، يسير بقاء، قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أذج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النذر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك. فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأذجن إليك بين أهل هذا جيج الآملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يذج إليك ذجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاهديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما. لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتتولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كما كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملت كتمته أو أعلنت أخفيته أو أظهرت وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا على مع جواره وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بذري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعدم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين وأشتاق إليك قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد ومن كادني فكد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نسيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعتف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك مطيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني عثرتي واغفر لي زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وذمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا رب نسبت وجهي وإليك يا رب مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منى ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
तो सोने मेरे वीर मारे मैं शाम चलिया बेकफन सारे यूसुफ तो सोने मेरे वीर मारे मैं शाम चलिया बेकफन सारे कबरा बनावा या रसिया पावा कबरा बनावा या रसिया पावा रो आके ज़ैनब किस पास जावा मेरा घर जलाया लुटिया रिदावा رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں جس ویر دے لئی چھڈیا مدینہ جویں قتل ہویا بھلنا کدی نہ جس ویر دے لئی چھڈیا مدینہ جویں قتل ہویا بھلنا کدی نہ انہوں کفن پاواں یا شام جاواں انہوں کفن پاواں یا شام جاواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں میرا گھر جلایا لٹیا داواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں میں دی بچاون وچ شام آئی سب لوگ ویکھن میری بیری دائی میں دی بچاون وچ شام آئی سب لوگ ویکھن میری بیری دائی خطبے سناواں خطبے سناواں یا ملوکاواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں میرا گھر جلایا لٹیا رداواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں ویراں دے قاتل خیمے چ آ گئے اے حسن زینب عابد نو آ کے ویراں دے قاتل خیمے چ آ گئے اے حسن زینب عابد نو آ کے ہن جل میں جاواں یا باہر آواں ہن جل میں جاواں یا باہر آواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں میرا گھر جلایا لٹیا رداواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں میرا گھر جلایا لٹیا رداواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں عابد بچاواں یا آگ بجاواں عابد بچاواں یا آگ بجاواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں میرا گھر جلایا لٹیا رداواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں یوسف تو سونے میرے ویر مارے میں شام چلیا بے کفن سارے یوسف تو سونے میرے ویر مارے میں شام چلیا بے کفن سارے قبرہ بناواں یا رسیا پاواں قبرہ بناواں یا رسیا پاواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں میرا گھر جلایا لٹیا رداواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں میرا گھر جلایا لٹیا رداواں رو آ کے زینب کس پاس جاواں आबिद बचावा या आग बुझावा, आबिद बचावा या आग बुझावा, रोआ के ज़ैनब किस पासे जावा, मेरा घर जलाया लुटिया रिदावा, रोआ के ज़ैनब किस पासे जावा। पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen in Kul Arwah al-Mumineen wal-Muminat Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat Ma Yujibun is requested for the names listed on the screen and whoever is ill here and elsewhere. Let us all recite this together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su'. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su'. Amman yujibul مضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Now let us invite Sayyid Hasan to come forward and recite tonight's Majlis. Per Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، شفيع المذنبين، رحمة للعالمين، سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا، أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعجل فرجه. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين، روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We first started off asking what were the traits that led the Kufans and anybody else who had written a letter to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. What traits did they possess? What traits and characteristics did they exhibit that led them to eventually betraying Imam Hussein alayhi salam? The first thing that we saw when looking at and analyzing the sermon in Kufa of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam was she highlighted the false allegiance the promises that they made that they broke. The fact that they had gone against their word. Then we continued in our next session and talked about why is it that they would break it. And we talked about that not everybody who wrote the letter to the Imam, not anybody who calls to their Imam of this time has the same objectives in mind. We all have different motives, different goals, different purposes. We expect different conclusions and results from the way that we speak to our Imam. So when they had written to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, you saw that there was true followers of the Imam who were seeking divine justice, who recognized that Imam Hussein was Khalifatullah fil ard. He was the rightful representative of truth on earth, and he deserved to be in charge. Others who were maybe in the bigger majority only wanted to look for what we would call social justice, social reform, ending corruption, freedom, liberty, justice, all that stuff. And then many others were just opportunists. They had weak faith. They didn't necessarily care about truth, about justice. They didn't care about the corruption that was going on. And they definitely didn't care about Islam as a religion. The reason they called the Imam was simply because it was materially beneficial for them. That's it. And because they thought that the Imam was going to come, start a revolution, they wanted a good position in his government. So they thought, okay, let's write letters, let's join, so that when he comes and starts giving out from the Baytul Mal, from the treasury and this and that, he'll remember, oh, you wrote to me? Here's a little extra tip for you. So a lot of opportunists were just like this. And then in our recent session, we talked about how when we're analyzing it and applying it to the relationship that we have with our Imam of the time, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajuhu sharif, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajuhu, we can also analyze and kind of be self-aware of the way that we call to our Imam too. Whether it's through the way that we write our arida, or the way that we ask for his faraj, when we're begging and asking and requesting his reappearance. We can do so for selfish, worldly, materialistic reasons, right? That, Imam, I'm writing this arida because I want a better job. I want money. I want to get married. I want a new house. I want a new car, right? It's not haram. We didn't say it's haram, but we said that this is probably one of the lowest sorts of relationships that you can have with the Imam. And the problem was this. Those who are enemies of Islam, just like back then it was Ibn Ziyad, Umar ibn Sa'ad, Shimr, Yazid, of course. The whole system, their tactics were designed for this kind of group, and they were offering them material rewards. If you don't support Imam, here's a little extra money for you. So the same thing would happen to us if we are begging, and the only relationship that we have with the Imam, with Allah or Islam in general, is that we're just looking for good things to take place. What's going to stop the Dajjal from coming and saying, look, your Imam can't give you anything, but I got the coronavirus vaccine. Well, why don't you work with me? Or maybe it won't be that. It's like maybe you shouldn't talk so much about Shiism, right? It could be something small. It doesn't have to be these big grandiose ideas. So that was the first level. The second level was people who were asking for the Imam, who only demand out of Islam socio-political ideas and benefits, meaning social justice reforms, ending corruption, ending oppression, justice, freedom, liberty, all these buzzwords. Well, the problem is this. For these kind of individuals, they don't necessarily care who brings that freedom and who brings that justice. Whether it's from the hands of a rightful representative on earth who's only going to come from Ali Muhammad, salawatullah alayhim ajma'in, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. Or if a fasiq does it, who cares? Right? We talked about how for some people, they said, look, Yazid is keeping us all safe right now. Yeah, there are some people who have to, be killed, but that's because they're going against the government. They're breaking the unity of the ummah. So Yazid has to do something about it. But look, people are getting paid. The government's doing nicely. People are doing well off. There's no wars going on right now. It's peace, it's freedom, it's tranquility. What's wrong with that? So this would be another level. Yes, we are after social justice, definitely. Not in the way that outside people talk about. Not the other definitions of Western academics. We have our own definition that the Ahlul Bayt have brought. That's the one that we're after. Our own definition of freedom. Our own definition of liberty. That's what we are after. But again, that's not the end goal for those who are truly after divine justice. And that was the third and most valuable group. That group is only looking, they call to their imam just for the sake of the imam coming. That's it. Because they know that the only way we can have true peace, true comfort, true reality, the only way that can be established is if this world is in the imam's hands. There's no other way. No matter how good a government gets, no matter how good whatever policies they may have domestically, foreign, in terms of foreign affairs, it doesn't matter. As long as the imam is not here and he's not in charge, then this is something that the highest group of believers, they're never going to be happy. That's why they will always say, وَعَجِّلْ فَرَجَهُمْ, right? Ajil, ajil. They want him to come back. Why? Because they know that until that happens, there won't be peace, freedom, true justice on this earth. Because this is what Allah has ordained, and this is what is in the main meaning of wilayah. Wilayah is something that Allah stipulates, not anybody else, not democratically, not based on pragmatic reasons. It's only something that Allah can determine. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now we're going to continue with the next part of the sermon of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. After she's gone through and accused them of these certain different traits, talking about how they broke their sort of actions, of how they broke their oath and their treaty and they went against their word. Now, for the next part we'll talk about tonight, she's shifting her focus over to some deadly internal spiritual diseases that lie dormant within them. And eventually we'll talk about how this also perhaps lies dormant within us as well. Let me start again from the beginning of the khutbah up until the line that we want to focus on tonight. So first she starts, Alhamdulillah wa salat ala Abi Muhammad wa ala tayyibin al-tahirin al-akhyar amma ba'd. Ya Ahl al-Kufa, hey Kufans. Ya Ahl al-Khatli wal-Ghadri wal-Khadal. You are people of deception, you're deceivers. You're double-crossers. You are abandoners. Ala fala raqa'til abra wala hada'til zafra. I hope that your tears never stop flowing, and your sighs and your moans and your anxiety never subsides. You never calm down. إنما مثلكم كمثل التي نقضت غزلها من بعد قوة أنكاثا تتخذون أيمانكم دخلا بينكم. And this is where she brings in that verse of the Quran that we talked about. Your example is only like a woman who undoes and untwists her yarn, breaking it up after spinning it so that it's strong. How did you do this? By you've made promises, and you make your promises a means of mutual deception amongst yourselves. That's where we reached. Now for the line that we will start with tonight. هل فيكم إلا صلف والعجب والشنف والكذب. Is there anything in you besides, or what are you except for these four traits, or at least the four ones we'll talk about tonight? The first is salaf, the second is ujb, the third is shanaf, and the fourth is kadhib. Tonight I think we'll focus on the first two, if we have time maybe the third. The first one we'll talk about is salaf. Salaf with a sad, not a sin, right? Because you're thinking salaf maybe like salafis. No. Salaf like salafis, that's with a sin. Salaf that we're talking about is with a sad. What is this? Simple definition or translation would just be salaf means bragging and boasting. If we want to expand the definition and break it down a bit deeper, we'd say that somebody who has this quality of salaf, or a salif, a person who has this and represents this, it's a person who praises themselves. They compliment themselves. And when they do this, it's out of a sense of pride and arrogance, but it's based on a quality that they do not have. So they're praising, right? They're proud of themselves. They have an arrogance regarding a quality that they don't even have. We have in one of the narrations attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, where he says, min dala'il humuq دالة بغير آلة وصلف بغير شرف. He says, there's some signs, there's various different signs of foolishness and stupidity, and he mentions just two of them here. The first one, dala بغير آلة. If we were to, it's like an expression he's using here, an Arabic expression. Literally, he's saying that you're trying to show something, you're trying to indicate something without a pointer, without a sign, right? Without an indicator. So again, literally applying it, it's like somebody's changing lanes without using like their blinkers or something like that, right? You're trying to go somewhere else, but you're actually not showing it. Right? You're doing it without any sort of reason. Right? You're kind of doing it haphazardly. So this way, it's, again, the best sort of translation, I guess, or explanation of this is that it's somebody who's bold, they're daring, they're confident, in fact, overconfident, but they have no reason. So they're moving around in their life, they're performing all these actions, which, again, show off this sort of bravado that they have, but they don't have anything to back it up. They don't have any reason, they don't have any proof, they don't have that trait or that quality within them, right? So, for example, if we're going to apply it to the driving one, if you want to, if a race car driver starts shifting in and out of lanes, or let's say an ambulance or police car, police officer, they drive a bit erratically, quote unquote, or recklessly, well, we're assuming that they have the training, they have the qualities, they can do something like that. They have the right to, right? If anybody's into like a car culture or whatever, if you see somebody like drifting or doing donuts, whatever, well, you expect them to know how to do that and what are the consequences of doing something like that, right? And you clearly know when you see a driver who's trained, you see them being able to show off their skills and techniques in one way. But somebody who's trying to show it off, but they don't know what they're doing, you can easily tell that, this person's just being an idiot. They're being stupid. They don't know what they're doing because they don't know the skills. They don't have the skills. So in that same way, the Imam is saying, one of the signs of stupidity is when you see individuals showing off all these things, their behavior, their words, skills that they just don't have, right? That's one. The other one, which is the focus of what we want to talk about, the same word that Sayyid Zainab alayhi salam used, is وَالصَّلَفْ بِغَيْرِ sharaf, is boasting and bragging, salaf بِغَيْرِ sharaf, when you don't have that sharafat, you're not sharif, you don't have any honor, you don't have any dignity. So in a sense, the opposite would be, look, you can boast, you can brag, you can show off a little bit if you've got something to back it up. If you have nothing to back it up, if you don't have that trait or quality, then you have nothing, you have no right to do that, right? If you can bench press 300 pounds, okay, fine, bench 300 pounds, great, do it. But if you're like me and you can barely do your own body weight, well then, be careful what plates you put on the rack, right? You have to be very careful. You don't want to show it off, especially if you don't have it. And that's what salaf is. It's showing off when you don't have that trait in the first place. So let's apply it first to the people of Kufa. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As we talked about when we broke down and analyzed the letters, when some of the Shias came to the heads of the tribes in Kufa, they said, look, it's time, let's write letters to Hussein ibn Ali so that we call him here and we can start a revolution. The tribal leaders, the true ulama, the fuqaha who were there, right, the real ones, they were saying, look, we can write all these letters, that's fine. But are you going to back up what you are saying right here? You're saying that you're ready to die for the Imam. Are you actually going to do it or not? If the Imam comes and we have to go all out war, are you going to step up or not? And they said, yes, of course, we'll give everything for the Imam, right? And this is the problem, right? They were saying, we are dedicated to, Ibn Zahra. We are dedicated to Ibn Ali. We are dedicated to the grandson of Rasulullah. We are dedicated to Islam. We're dedicated to the truth, to justice. That's what we're here for. That's why we want to write the letters. But some of them, of course, didn't have that dedication. They were bragging and showing off this right that, yes, we are on the path. We are ready to lead this revolution, when they never had that quality in them in the first place. And they would speak like this in this very boastful and, kind of gumptious way. I don't know how else to put it, right? They had no right to speak like this, but they were doing that. Now the question is this: don't we do the same thing in so many different aspects of our life? I mean, the one at least we want to focus on today is about our religiosity, about our connection with Allah, with the prophets, with the imams, with our ulama, whatever way you want to put it. The way that we sometimes talk about our own dedication to religion, or dedication to religious knowledge, or our religiosity, our taqwa, whatever, right? And sometimes, again, I'll give people the benefit of the doubt, but sometimes you kind of get shocked by, the pride that some people have, right? Like, yes, we are on the path of the Ahlul Bayt, we are on the truth. We are the followers of Zahra, we are the followers of Ali, we are the true followers of Rasulullah. Okay, alhamdulillah, it's wonderful. Oh, if I was there in Karbala, if I was in Kufa, and they had said this stuff, oh, do you know what I would have done to Shimr? Do you know what I would have done to Ibn Ziyad? Do you know what I would have done for Muslim ibn Aqil? Yeah, sure you would have. Give me a break, come on. Yeah. I mean, think about it if we want to apply it right now. There are some individuals who are crying about the fact that they have to go out and wear a mask to protect the mu'mineen and mu'minat. You can't even put a mask on your face, and you think you can take an arrow for Abu Abdullah? Come on, right? We have to, think very realistically over here. What are we actually willing to sacrifice and give up? What sort of difficulties are we willing to undertake? Right? And I gave the example last time. If it were to happen where the imam comes and says, look, right now, we're trying to get rid of Al Saud or whatever, so I need your bank account passwords. I might be like, hey, Imam, I really love you, but why don't you just give me your account number and just tell me how much you need, and maybe I can just transfer it to you. I don't know if I should give you my password. They say it's not so safe, and who knows, on the internet somebody could take that. I know it's almost a ridiculous example, but what happens if a mu'min brother or sister asks for the same thing? They say, look, we're not doing so well, or we're in need of donations. Do you mind giving something? Oh, sorry, times are tough, corona and stock market, all this other stuff. We can't really do anything right now. Well, maybe we'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they're telling the truth. Maybe. At the same time, we have, as a narration attributed to our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far Sadiq, alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, that if you want to see true Shias, true brotherhood and sisterhood, it would look like this, that in a city, if a mu'min brother comes to another mu'min brother, or a mu'min sister comes to another mu'min sister, and they say, I have a need from you, right? I'm in need of some money. The one who's being requested, they should basically look the other way, open up their pockets and say, take whatever you want, and not think twice about it. How many of us are willing to do that? I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I don't think I'd do that for most people. Probably even in the community, right? Yeah, there's some people I think, yeah, maybe I could do that with, but with everybody, I don't know, that sounds very difficult. These little sorts of sacrifices, which sound so sort of, crazy and grandiose to us, well, these are the sorts of things that the followers, the ones who became shaheed with Imam Hussein, that's what they did. When Imam gave permission to one of them, said, look, I'll give you money, your son's being held ransom by the government, by Yazid, here's some money, go. I'm giving back my bay'ah, I'm telling you, you can go and free your son. He said, I don't care about that, Allah will take care of him. I'm here for you, I'm here to defend you. Or even look at some of the others, Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, right, on the way, when he has this conversation with the Imam. When Zuhair comes back to the tent, right, when he's having this famous conversation with his wife, he's saying, I'm a little worried about what's going to happen to you. Now, alhamdulillah, eventually, his wife sort of smacks some sense into him, like, what's wrong with you? Like, I'll end up divorcing you just so you can go out. Like, don't think about me. Think about the son of Zahra. What's wrong with you? And we see the same thing from the wife of Habib ibn Mudahir, right? They needed to, and again, was it a test? Let's say Habib, he was testing his wife. With Zuhair, again, maybe he was testing his wife as well, or maybe his wife was testing him, who knows? The point is this, is that even some of the best ones, some things, family, wealth, health, security, these things can hold us back from actually being dedicated to the Imam. And look, this is not easy. This is why there is only a handful of people with the Imam. This is not an easy thing to do. Again, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. We have this sort of predisposition to just, like, oh, I can't believe they abandoned the Imam and the Kufans and this, oh, I can't believe they did this. Or even the ones who wrote the letters who are fighting against the Imam. I mean, think about, for example, the Iraqis who were conscripted by Saddam. That's very difficult. They're fighting against their own Shia brothers in Iran, right? In the Iran-Iraq sort of created war that happened over there. It's not that simple. How many of us have been in a situation like that? That's a very difficult situation. Times of war and your life being threatened. It's not that simple. But we can think about financial issues here. We can, alhamdulillah, most of us we're living comfortably. We're okay. Yes, some of us may be struggling with the given environment. But given the principles that they all did here, that we know from back then, the followers of the Imams gave everything. How many of us are willing to start working on doing that same thing? When we know that there are good projects going on, when we know that the center, for example, is looking for donations, how many of us are willing to say, okay, I can cut down X, Y, Z so that I can, give a little more? That sort of little bit of sacrifice is something that's very, very difficult. But here's the thing. On one hand, if we know it's difficult, we know it's tough, we might not be doing it. Okay. But the problem that Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam and Imam Ali alayhi salam seem to be addressing is what? If you don't have it, then don't act like you have it. Fine, you don't want the Imam to come back, right, because you can't support him? Okay, but then maybe change your dua. Maybe be a bit more honest in your dua. Like, Imam, I want you to come back, but I'll be honest, I actually don't care about justice. I only want material gains. At least you're going to have some sort of honesty now. And that's what we saw when we talked last time about the parting words in the sermon of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. What was he saying? When they were like, okay, we are sorry, we shouldn't have done this, we're fools. Tell us what to do. He said, I'm not going to make the same mistake again. He said, the blood of my father hasn't dried up yet. Do you think we're foolish enough to trust you again? No, because this quality is within you. You talk too much, and you're talking about traits that you do not have. So one thing for us is that we have to be careful that look within ourselves, figure out what are our negative traits, and make sure we don't start expanding and covering them up unnecessarily. As we sometimes say, ta'aruf or takalluf or things like that. Don't start expanding and boasting and bragging about a quality that you and I may not have. Instead, it might be better that we're honest with ourselves and work on those issues that we need to work on. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this was salaf. This was bragging and boasting and expanding and talking about this quality that the person doesn't have. The next is ujub, right? Ujub, of course, this is a main topic of discussion in books of spirituality and books of akhlaq, right? One of the hadith in the book 40 Hadith by Imam Khomeini, Qaddasallahu Sirru, is dedicated to the topic of ujub. And if anybody wants to really understand the topic, they should go refer to that. So, if we're defining it, it's self-praise, again, right? Again, sometimes they define it as being proud or arrogant, in a sense. We say, okay, well, what's the difference between this and salaf? We said salaf is also boasting and bragging. Well, what is ujub then? What's the difference? Well, some will say, no, there's no real difference. Sometimes in conversation, you just use synonyms, and maybe that's what Sayyidah Zainab was doing. Others say, no, this quality of salaf is different than ujub. Salaf, we said, according to some, is that when you boast about something you don't have. But they say ujub is more general than that. Ujub is that you could have this self-praise and you could be boasting and bragging about a quality you don't have, but it also includes complimenting yourself, praising yourself, boasting and bragging, even with qualities that you do actually have. Ujub contains this as well. And based on that, the scholars of akhlaq say that there's various different levels to what type of ujub you and I might possess, unfortunately. So the first one is this. The first one is, call it, let's say, the bottom level, right? The one it's bad, but it's not the highest on the Richter scale, we'll put it that way. First one is having a general feeling of superiority, and that takes away your humility. So you feel great, but you lack humility. Simple example, right? We sometimes feel superior to Sunnis, don't we? Yeah, we're on the path of truth. We got it right, they got it wrong. And instead that becomes a way for us to not be humble with them. Do you really think that if they understood the same history, the same proofs that we did, that they would remain like that? Maybe, maybe not. Or does that really mean that we have gone through the history that we've needed to go through? I mean, you've seen that. How many people are like, we never heard this stuff about the letters in Kufa? Well, I mean, history goes beyond the mimbar, right? Don't expect the mimbar to be a source of history for you. It's not, right? These lectures that are 20, 30, 40 minutes, or some speakers, hour plus, that's not an education, that's not an Islamic education. Madrasa is not an Islamic education. Mimbar is not an Islamic education. Education is going and reading. It's going and really expanding, right? To the utmost, obviously, it's going to Hausa, right? If you want to waste your life like some people have done, right? But for others, it's, you read a little bit more. You ask questions, you research, you improve your knowledge, but you remain humble. That, yeah, okay, I know some things. Alhamdulillah that Allah has provided me with that. But I'm not going to let that make me feel superior over others. I'm going to humble myself and say, look, there's always going to be room for more growth. So that's sort of one level. The next level is that feeling of superiority. Some of us might say, Alhamdulillah that Allah has made us Shias. That second higher level of ujub is when you say, you know what? That trait didn't actually come from God. Me being a follower of Ali, that's from me. I'm the one who's following Ali. Why? Because I know about Saqifa, and I read about this and that, and my aql is the one that made me do this. Right? I followed these traits. God didn't do that. I'm the one. I use free will. God gave me free will. I'm acting upon it. What does God have to do with this? Now, we don't say that out loud, right? But that's what's going on internally. Now, maybe that's an extreme example. I'll go to something simple. A job interview. You get the job. Say, it's because I planned. I prepped. I did the work. You do well on a test or an exam. I studied. I stayed up. I put in the work. If God wanted to shut down your brain, He could have done that. But we don't think about that in that sense. It's a way for Shaitan to say, hey, yeah, it's all you. You did it. Great job, right? That's what Shaitan's doing because he knows we're like little kids. We love that praise. We love that attention. So this is the second level of ujb. The third level, this is where it gets worse, really bad, if it's not bad enough already, is that, because before it was all about good traits, at the very least, right? Like being on the path of Ali Muhammad is great. But the third level is that you start to see your bad traits in a good light. When somebody, for example, is very rude, very, in people's faces, they have no barrier, no filter. What do they say? I'm just honest. I'm just very blunt. That's just the way I am. And they start to spin it like that's a good quality. No, you just have terrible akhlaq. You're rude, right? Don't pass that off like it's something positive. You can tell somebody the truth without being a jerk, right? There's a way of doing that. We can put up, there's a reason that we have this level of modesty, that we use these social devices to explain to somebody, right, that, Hasan, your hair looked disgusting today, right? And there's a nicer way you can say that, right? Inshallah, may Allah protect me from that always. And all of you as well. So, this third higher level is what? Is when you start to see, and I start to see bad traits, the ones that are objectively bad, there's a block in our soul and our mind, and we start to think that they're actually good traits. Now, the next one, the highest one, the most, what they say according to some, is the most extreme case of ujub. And it's called idlal. Idlal, literally translated, is kind of like taking liberties. But I think the explanation of it makes more sense. It's where, now that you've already felt superior, you don't have the humility, you don't consider your positive traits from God, now you've taken a step further and said, well, even the negative ones that I have, they're actually good traits, right, for me. Then you say, you know what? All this goodness that I have, God owes me a favor. I'm just full of all this good stuff. I'm a person who practices all the time. I pray my salah, I read my namaz, sometimes I even do namaz al-shab. I donate, I give sadaqah, I do it out loud so everybody knows, and I do it secretly. I'm involved, I volunteer, I do all these different things. So, you know what, God? I expect something in return. I did all this stuff for you in your religion, so you've got to give me something too. It's make this sense of religious entitlement. I did all of this, no, give me something back. Otherwise, what's the point? And it's interesting, mirrors almost exactly that materialistic type of group that wrote letters to the Imam, or us when we talked to the Imam at the time. Like, Imam, look, we're saying, we're doing dua faraj, and, I don't take any drugs, Imam, and, I paid my lawazim, or whatever, I'm paying my dues, so, maybe you should come back and, take care of me too. That's why you should come back, Imam, for all these reasons. Here, these are the way we sometimes make our demands, right? Tit for tat. That's what we expect. Quid pro quo. Right? That's how we treat the Imam. We say, look, I'm so great, of course you have to give it to me. Because of all these great qualities I have. Okay, yeah, that other person in the community, they don't show up, they don't come to the programs, they're not involved, all they do is complain. Yeah, you can get rid of their job, right? You can cause family issues over that. Yeah, well, you can do all that stuff, but not me. I'm so great. Like, don't cause me any of those issues. I don't deserve it. We start to get this sense of idea of entitlement. I shouldn't be subject to all these things. Whereas if we really take an objective look in history, materialistically, objectively speaking, who has had it worse in history? Prophets and the Imams. They're the ones who had it the worst. The worst people in history are the ones who live in palaces and beautiful homes and all these sort of things. Again, not to say that everybody who does that is in that sense, but generally throughout history, it's the emperors and kings and dictators and all this who enjoy all these materialistic things. So this shows that a person's the height of their religious, spoiled brat nature, right? They're just like, I did all this good stuff, now I demand all these things. And some, with your kids, I'm sure some of you understand that too, right? Well, I threw out the garbage yesterday, so I think, I deserve a raise in my allowance. Or I did this, so you should let me go out. And what are you talking about, right? You did this tiny little thing, and now all of a sudden you're making demands out of me, your father, your mother, how dare you, right? These kind of things. That's not the way that Allah explains it, but you know what I mean, right? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. How does this ujub get there in the first place, though? How is it possible that somebody, again, with just a little bit of feeling superior and not being humble, all of a sudden, it's possible for them to jump to this high level where they're demanding things out of God. And even their worst traits, they think they are good. We're going to mention, inshallah, next session, a narration attributed to the sixth Imam, and he seems to give this formula for how ujub develops. And hopefully, inshallah, we can talk about some cures for it as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And after that discussion, we'll continue on to the other traits that Sayyidah Zainab has mentioned, shanaf, kadhib, and then we'll continue on with the rest of the sermon as well. You look back in Karbala, and you see the two different sides of these traits being represented and manifested there. With Yazid, with his army, with all of his commanders, with all of his followers, what do you see? You see pride. You see arrogance. You see them boasting. They were so depraved that the person who has the head of Imam Hussein, the son of Ali, the grandson of Rasulullah, the one who has his head is going around, screaming in public that, look whose head I have. Can you imagine? This is a Muslim, a person who's praying, a person who probably knows more Quran than you and I do, a person who may have even seen Rasulullah with his own eyes. But they are walking around with the head of the son of Ali and acting arrogant about that. When we take all these tiny, tiny little steps, it can develop into serious, serious spiritual diseases. We can't see that sometimes. We think that we're so much better than everybody else that we're not susceptible, but we could be. We have to be careful. But you see, we have examples on the other side as well. With the lovers and the followers of Abu Abdullah, we see that they don't have this boastfulness, this arrogance. Instead, they reflect humility. And we would say that it's this humility which perhaps saved all of them. In fact, one of them specifically that I think comes to mind is the humility of Hur. That quality, even though he had every right to feel superior, he allowed himself to humble himself in front of the Imam. Look at what he does. When he stops the Imam on his way to Kufa and he starts to bring him to Karbala, what does he do? First, he's praying behind the Imam. Now, he's a commander. Imam even said, you can go and lead your own jama'ah. He says, no, we'll pray behind you. First sign of humility. He recognizes the truth. He recognizes the leader of truth. And then the second, when he finally puts his hands on the reins of the horse of Hussein, which is the horse of Ali, which is the horse of Rasulullah, when he puts his hands there, and Imam Hussein says those devastating, harsh words towards him. He says, may your mother cry for you. What does Hur respond? What would anybody else in that situation respond? They would reply just the same way. They would reply with insults too. But Hur, because of the love that was in his heart, because of the humility in his heart, what does he reply? The words that break our heart when we think about it. He said, if your mother had been anyone other than Fatimatul Zahra, then I would reply to you the same way. Perhaps it was this love of Zahra which saved Hur in each and every step. When we now fast forward to Hur on the day of Ashura, when he's going back and forth wondering what to do, when he sees himself between heaven and hell, when he finally goes towards, and he realizes that he has to go towards the truth, to go towards the Imam, even then, what does he do? He says, I can't go forward like this. I shouldn't go forward like a free person. He tells the ones with him, he says, blindfold me, tie my hands together. I want to go towards Hussein as a slave. This is a sign of humility. When he finally comes to Hussein, he falls down at his feet, and he begins begging and crying for mercy and forgiveness. He says, the reason your children are crying is because of me. Please, will you forgive me? And how could somebody like Hussein not forgive somebody like Hur? Then Hur establishes his humility another way. After Imam Hussein says, of course you are forgiven, then Hur says, but I need to seek forgiveness from someone else too. He says, let me speak to the women. So Hur then goes to the women of the Ahlul Bayt, and he says, please, will you forgive me for bringing you and your family and your children here and causing them this thirst and this grief? He says, yes, of course, Hur, Hussein has forgiven you, we have forgiven you as well. But perhaps the greatest thing, the greatest sign of Hur's humility, the thing which probably saved him, was in this final moment when he said, but I need to speak with one other person. And he says, let me speak to Sayyida Zainab. And he calls Sayyida Zainab. He says, I need for you to do me one favor before I go. She says, what is it? My brother Hussein has forgiven you. The women have forgiven you. We've all forgiven you. What else do you want? He says, please, you must forgive me. And you have to promise me one thing. What is it? He says, on the day of judgment, promise me that you won't complain to your mother Fatima about what I've done. I know you have every right to complain to her that I am the cause of her son's thirst. I am the cause of the ummah killing her, bringing here and killing her son. Please make sure you do not complain to Fatima on this day. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. ماطم حسين.
बेबदन सर रो रहे हैं बेरिदा सर देख कर बेबदन सर रो रहे हैं बेरिदा सर देख कर बेबदन सर रो रहे हैं बेरिदा सर देख कर हंस रहा है शाम का लश्कर ये मंजर देख कर बेबदन सर रो रहे हैं बेरिदा सर देख कर बेबदन सर रो रहे हैं बेरिदा सर देख कर देखता कैसे वो गुर्बत साहिबे ततहीर की आई जब नेज़े पे चादर ज़ैनबे दिलगिर की गिर गया नेज़े से सर गाजी का चादर देख कर बेबदन सर रो रहे हैं बेरिदा सर देख कर बेबदन सर रो रहे हैं बेरिदा सर देख कर पर न जाए बेरिदा ज़ैनब पे आबिद की नज़र इस कदर था गम ज़दा दिल में ये मंज़र सोच कर शाम तक चलता रहा आबिद ज़मी पर देख कर बेबदन सर रो रहे हैं بے ردا سر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر مارتا جاتا ہے بچی کو تماچے ایک لائیں پوچھتا ہے اے سکینہ آج کیوں روتی نہیں ظلم سب وہ سہ رہی ہے باپ کا سر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر جان زندہ اس گھری سجاد کیسے رہ گئے مانگتا تھا کوئی بی بی کو کنیزی کے لیے اور زینب روتی تھی عباس کا سر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر تیزنا کے سبب جو راہ میں بچے گرے پاؤں اونٹوں کے پرے اور دفن وہ ہوتے گئے کانپ اٹھے نیزے پہ اس منظر کو اصغر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر جان عرض شان ہائے غربت بنت علی کربلا کے بعد زینب شام تک روئی نہ تھی رو پری شیری کا وہ آتا ہوا گر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر ہنس رہا ہے شام کا لشکر یہ منظر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر بے بدن سر رو رہے ہیں بے ردا سر دیکھ کر الفاتحہ
دعائے فرج بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم اللہم کل ولیک الحجت ابن الحسن صلواتک علیہ وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتيه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة. لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مطلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الردي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع الدين وخواتيم عملي. وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه. السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصح. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوطهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقق الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن عجل الله فرجه وسخر الله مخرجه ودهورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.